Carl, welcome to the Mindful Fire podcast. I'm so glad to have you here.
Hey, Adam, thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's very exciting to have you here. I guess it was a month ago now. You and I met a month ago or so at the Economy Conference, and I was lucky enough to know Deb, who invited you to the Legends dinner that I was planning, which is basically something I like to do when I visit a place. I invite a bunch of people that I know, a bunch of cool people that I know. I call them legends. And I bring everyone together, even though they don't know each other, for a dinner or a happy hour where we all get to know each other, have a great time. And so I was thrilled to have you join me at the Legends dinner with a bunch of other Phi legends at this economy conference. So that was super fun. We got to sit right across from each other and chat about mindfulness. And now here you are on the Mindful Fire podcast. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, that was super cool. I didn't expect to do a mile run after our dinner. I don't know if you heard that story, but yeah, I ran a mile to our next destination and it was quite unpleasant, but the dinner was awesome. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me.
Yeah, no, it was my pleasure. I'm remembering now because, yeah, it was a long walk, but you were there when we got there from driving. So, yeah, I guess now that I'm putting it together, you did run that. Why did you
Yeah,
run that?
yeah. So I actually walked to the dinner and one of the neighborhoods we walked through looked a little suboptimal. I think we saw a drug deal go down in broad daylight. So we finished up at the dinner and I think I had ordered a single cheeseburger at the dinner. And for some reason they brought me a double one out. I'm like, oh geez, this doesn't look like a good life decision, but I don't like food waste. So I'm just going to eat the whole thing. I had a beer. Then we got finished done eating, and one of our mutual friends, attendees, Allison, was like, I'm a runner. Let's run to the next place. Like, oh no. Like, she's like, come on, let's do it. And then Amy Minkley, another friend, was like, oh, I'll do it with you too. Like, you know what? I don't really feel comfortable with any of us going by themselves, but it's nighttime now. We just saw this drug deal, and I think there might have been a fight as well. I don't want to let these two go back. So I agreed to run with him. And I did run the whole time. But when I say run, I mean it in the loosest of terms. I am not a fast runner, but it was an interesting experience. It was fine. It felt pretty good after it was done. But Adam, I don't like to run.
I'm not a huge fan of running myself. I caught a ride with Carrie, I think, Carrie from the dinner. So that was a different route that I took. So, Carl, I'd love to have you start by sharing with the audience a little bit about who you are, your journey, and what you're up to in the world.
Oh man. So back at the end of 2012, I was a software developer and I wasn't too happy with my job. It could be very stressful. The work wasn't fun. It was for a medical device. Software people tend to like the code, and I wrote very little code. I wrote lots and lots and lots of documentation and dealt with the FDA, and it was quite tedious and miserable. One day I Googled, how do I retire early? I stumbled across Mr. Money Mustache, and the first thing I thought of when I saw his blog, like, oh wow, this is some kind of like elaborate scam. What if I come across? I can't figure out what this guy is trying to sell, but this person is saying he retired at 31. And in my own life, I never knew anyone who retired before a conventional age, like 65. I think I had someone who actually died at work. So I'm like, this is garbage. But then I gave it a chance. I was pretty desperate at the time. I really did not like my job. And I think I came across his post on the 4% rule. I'm like, wow, this is just a simple math problem. It's not even that difficult. Fortunately, I was already a saver. So while we didn't have enough to retire, it wouldn't take me that much longer. I thought about 4 more years or 1,500 days to accomplish my goal, which is pretty silly. You never know how the stock market is going to perform. But I just made an assumption like it's going to return 10% or something like that. And it turned out it returned a lot better than 10%. So I was able to retire a year early than I thought I'd be able to, even though I didn't. I was too chicken, so I stayed at my job for another year. But yeah, I quit in April of 2017. So I'm almost 7 years into it at this point. And yeah, I didn't know what my life was going to look like. I wouldn't recommend anyone do it how I did it for many reasons, but one of those reasons is I was running away from something. So what was going to happen after I accomplished this goal? You always hear the story about the dog that catches the car. The dog's like, now what? I didn't think this was going to happen. And that was kind of me. Hey, look, I can quit. And I did. Now what the heck do I do with my life? And eventually I figured it out. I think it's taken me a long time to catch my groove, but I feel like I'm in a pretty good place now. Funny enough, I'm still not completely where I want to be. I'm still catching up to life. I'm sitting in one of our live and flips. We made our money fixing up houses. And right before I talked to you, I was digging holes in my backyard to put a new fence in. At this point in life, I'm done with home remodeling, but I have to finish this house up because I'm already committed to it, and it is 95% done. So, what else could I answer for you, Adam?
Well, I appreciate you kind of giving that color. And I think, yeah, one of the things I hear so often from people on the path to FI or even having reached FI is the now what, right? Like I knew the math, I did the work, and I got there, but I think so many people don't really know what they want when they get there. And it sounds like that was your experience to some degree. And I think what you said is a huge point as well. It's like you were running away from a job you didn't like, but not necessarily running towards anything. And so, are there any lessons that you learned in going through that other people can take away?
Oh, there's 2 that really stand out. The first one is I thought I would quit work and then, like, the next day, there'd be rainbows and unicorns in the sky, it would rain beer, and life would just be this amazing thing. And it turned out life was a lot better. I could spend more time with my kids, I could get stuff done, I didn't have to live as crazy, as hectic of an existence, but I really wasn't any happier. I was actually talking to our friend JL Collins a month ago, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't know why you would expect that. Like, if you have money, it'll fix money problems. It's not going to fix anything else that's going wrong in your life. Now, maybe you can take some of that money and use it to fix some of the other stuff that's wrong, which we have. We could talk about that a little bit later if you want. But you're not all of a sudden going to be, your life isn't going to go to 11. That was a Spinal Tap reference just because you quit work. The problems that you had before are still gonna be there, and there might be new ones because all of a sudden you've got a lot of time to think that 40 hours or 50 hours you spent at work are yours now, and stuff might surface that you didn't expect. So that's number 1, and again, that's FI isn't necessarily gonna make you happier, but the number 2 part is build a life you really love while you're still at work. There's no reason why you can't start working on you and your life before you quit, and then if you've done it right, I think when you actually do leave your job, it's just gonna be like a smooth, it's not gonna be like jumping off a cliff, it's gonna be like taking a 6-inch step down instead. Life is barely gonna feel much different because 'cause you're already pretty much living the life you want.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that is absolutely what I am trying to do as I'm on the path to FI. I'm trying to get clear on the life that I want to live and then start trying it on now, start living it now. The podcast is a huge aspect of that. I started the podcast thinking, oh, I want to be a mindfulness teacher. Turns out that's not exactly what I want, right? I want it to be a component of my life, component of what I teach and share, but not the whole thing. Right. And so I wouldn't have known that if I had waited until I reached financial independence and then quit to be a mindfulness teacher. I'd probably be pretty miserable if I didn't take that initiative and start trying to figure that out while I'm on the path. So I think there's a lot to be said for, getting clear on what you think you want and then starting to try things with mini experiments, something that I teach and something that the Donegans were talking about at Economy, figuring out what you're running towards and then creating mini experiments to try that out. I think it's very approachable.
I love the mini experiment stuff and that you're already figuring it out before you're already there. Like how cool is that? You're gonna save yourself a lot of time and it might be less stressful too. The other thing I'll say, Adam, real quick, is for a lot of people, leaving full-time work is going to be one of the biggest life changes you'll ever experience. It might not be quite as bad as a divorce or quite as great as getting married or having kids, but all of a sudden your life is going to shift drastically and you better brace yourself for it. Chances are it's going to be pretty good, but it might not be exactly what you expect either. But by you doing these mini experiments, you're setting yourself up for success and I think less stress once you actually do make that move.
I think you're absolutely right. You mentioned that when you first came across Mr. Money Mustache and you realized, wow, this is just a math problem. I can do this. And you said, I want to do this in 1,500 days. It's also worth mentioning that you had a very popular blog called 1500days.com where you started documenting your journey. Tell me a little bit about why you did that. You mentioned when we were talking that like you didn't think anyone was ever going to read it. So what was your motivation for documenting your journey?
Oh man, so there was a couple reasons. The most important one, and what you alluded to, is I never thought anyone was going to read it, and I didn't care. But Adam, I find writing so therapeutic, and I don't know if you do much writing or what your version of personal therapy is, but a lot of times I'll have like a little seed for an idea in my brain. I'll start writing, and then I get into this flow state, and I'm done 2 hours later, and I've arrived at a completely different place, a completely
Mhm,
different thought in my mind. So the main reason I did it was to help me process a lot of these thoughts that were going through my head because I knew I would work through them by writing. The other reason I wrote it is I've always put my net worth on there, which is a little bit strange. I've never liked how taboo money is in our society. Like, no one talks about how much they make at work or their net worth or anything like that. And I think that's really, really sad because we place money on this huge pedestal in Western culture. Like we see these articles like the 10 billionaires under 30 or the richest guy in the world, like Elon Musk just passed up Mark Zuckerberg again. And we just worship money and those who have it. And I wish it was the opposite. I wish we would all talk about it, all help each other with it and get past it so we can
mhm,
use money for valuable things instead of this measuring stick to put people on magazine covers and stuff like that. Like, let's use money to get our mental health sorted out. Let's use money to eliminate the things we don't like in life. And if we talk about it, maybe it doesn't have to be taboo thing anymore. Like that's why a lot of people buy weird objects because maybe they don't have money, but they want other people to think
mhm,
they do. And it's kind of a strange and a little bit sad phenomenon. I think people and society is held back by this taboo notion. So I hoped, and I don't think it worked out this way, but I'm like, hey, maybe if I share my net worth and really share my journey and the details of it, maybe it'll make things a little less taboo. And I guess some people, like there's some people, I'll go to these financial conferences and they'll be like, hi, my name is X. And yeah, my net worth is this. I'm like, wow, you told me that in the second sentence. And that's pretty cool. But I still don't think most people have gotten over that, and yeah, it's a difficult thing. I don't what do you think about all this, Adam? Do people ever ask you about money, or have you ever had opportunities to help people in your life? Because I'll back up to say something else real quick, Adam. When I started
sure,
the blog, I was completely anonymous. I'm like, oh man, I don't really want to be associated with this since I do share my income. And then, due to a strange circumstance, the world found out who I was and I wasn't anonymous anymore. And all our friends like found out one one morning, and I'm like, "Oh crap!" And I thought it would be a great opportunity. Like, hey, now my friends know about us. They know we're doing all right. Maybe they'll ask us for help, and this is an opportunity or an opening. And it wasn't. No one gave a shit. Some of them were surprised. Sorry, I don't know if I was supposed to swear around.
it's all good, man, all good.
Okay, feel free to bleep me. Some people were surprised by the amount, but no one's like, "Hey, do you mind if could you take a look at our finances or give us some tips or let us know what we should do?" That might have happened a couple times, but I don't think anyone took the
Not too
advice
much.
seriously. Yeah, many more people asked me if they could have some of the money. That was the common result. Not how about you, Adam? Have you ever had opportunities to assist people? I'm curious to how to get through.
I agree that it is very taboo, and I'm not super forthcoming with, like, the specifics, and part of that's, like, my wife is a little bit more reserved and not, as into talking about money and all these things, more in line with the norm of society, I'd say. I am more okay with it, but just, like, don't go into the details too much. But, yeah, I think because I'm, like, always, like, an advocate for the FIRE movement, as you can imagine, once I found out, like, "Wait a second, this is very possible," right? For me, it was like the 4% rule was like a revelation because it was like, "Wait a second, I thought it was like 10,000,000, 5,000,000, infinity that I needed to retire." But once you actually do the math, you're like, "Wait a second, like, if my life costs 100,000, I need 2.5 million." And that's a lot of money, but it's not 10,000,000, it's not infinity, and so it makes it a lot more realistic. So, like, I'll tell anyone who will listen, like, "Yo, like, you" like, especially, like, where I work at Google, like, these are high earning people with everything set up for them to be able to save and invest in a optimized way. And so I'm like, yo, you got to be taking advantage of the post-tax 401k and this and that. And so people do come and ask me for advice and how to do it and things like that. But still, I would say it's like it's very small portion, but I force myself into those scenarios sometimes by talking about it.
One other really quick question for you. I'm curious to hear
Sure.
about your experience at Google. I was talking to someone else who's in tech, and he's like, "Yeah, I think a lot of us in tech have a much higher propensity for fight. We hear about this, and I don't want to sound elitist or anything like that, but maybe though." And this guy was actually high functioning autistic. He's like, a lot of us think a lot about numbers a lot more. So I think when we hear this, it makes perfect sense to us, and it's obvious that it is the right thing to do. What do you think about that? Maybe do you see higher? Do you think more people are like that at Google or in big tech?
From my perspective, a lot of people, especially early on in the fire movement, and even probably still, are in the tech world because it's easier to do if you're making a high salary. And a lot of people in the tech industry are engineers and otherwise, and making a good salary and getting good stock and have access to these things. So they're able to do it. People at Google tend to be optimizers, right? They're always very into numbers and engineering and things like that. They're always just trying to optimize things to get the most out of something. And so this is a problem that you can understand and optimize to the nth degree. And the prize at the end is pretty damn good. It's freedom, right? Like it's the ability to do anything that you want. So I think that's the way that a bunch of people go. But then there's another kind of group that they use their high salary to have a baller lifestyle, right? In California, like they're going and buying a $2 million house. A $2 million house in California is just a normal house at this point. And so the lifestyle costs a lot, but some people get a nice house and a nice car. You know, they'll get the Tesla and maybe they'll get a Tahoe house if they're doing really well. And that's fine. But for me, I don't value that as much, right? Certainly not the ongoing expenses of it. I optimize more towards freedom and options rather than like status and like comforts. This kind of came up for me in a big way during the layoffs, right? Which happened last January and this January in 2024 as well. I just saw these people that, yeah, maybe they're making $500,000, $600,000. I don't know, a ton of money, right? Some of these engineers and or like directors at these tech companies, and then their job gets eliminated in the middle of the night, and now they are screwed. It doesn't matter how much money you make if your expenses are high, you're putting yourself in a bad situation. And so I thought of myself, I'm like, lay me off. I'm fine. Like I'm not worried about it. Knowing that I have the money in the bank and that like I'm fine either way, whether I get laid off or not, is worth everything. It's really valuable. So long answer to a simple question, but I think that it could go both ways.
Yeah. I'll just say if you do buy the Tahoe house, which I encourage you to do, you should invite all your friends and podcast guests over there. So I'd be completely supportive of that
Yeah.
decision.
I'm looking for a friend that has a Tahoe house. Actually, I do have a friend that has Tahoe. They moved up there during the pandemic, but yeah, that's something we used to do. That's awesome. Is like rent a house for the season and
Yeah.
just like hang out up there and leave your stuff up there. Oh, it's the best.
Ooh, and that's a good point, Adam. It might be better to it's like a pickup truck. It's always better to know a friend with one than having to own one yourself, because most of the time you're not gonna be hauling anything in that big bed. But if you know someone with a Tahoe house or the pickup truck, you've
Yeah,
got a
or a
good friend.
boat. Yeah, or
Boat,
a boat.
yeah. Boats,
We
yeah.
are always looking for someone with the boat when we were living in the Bay. That's another level if you have a boat in the Bay Area. One of the things you also mentioned there, Carl, is that money can help us solve money problems, but it can't help us solve all the other areas of our life. And so I know this is something you've been thinking about a lot recently about just the fact that money is only one aspect of our life. And we tend to, especially people in the fire movement, tend to think that it's going to solve all or a lot of our problems. So I'd love to hear your experience and how you've been thinking about this idea of money is only one thing in life.
Yeah, so I was very binary about my pursuit of financial independence. I put money on this huge pedestal, and I thought as soon as I got to my number, everything would be great. We had done live and flips before, and when I discovered Mr. Money Mustache that day, we had actually bought like kind of our first nice house that didn't need any work. Right after I discovered that, we sold it. I think like a week later, we put the house on the market and moved to a house that needed a lot of work to continue the live and flipping. So I would work at my real job for like 40 or 50 hours a week, do this live and flip for like 40 or 50 hours a week. And then I had two young kids at the same time. And for some reason, my kids when they were younger had this habit of waking up like at 5 in the morning and oh man, it's just giving me PTSD just thinking about all this. I wanted to be a good father and spend time with them, and I wanted to be up with them when they got up. So I would like wake up at 4 in the morning and try to do like find quiet tasks to do because you can't make noise early. I don't want to wake up the neighborhood or my family and start working, like get an hour, hour and a half in and do some more work after they go to bed. So man, there was a lot of times I was still up at like 11. Oh, and I was working on the blog too, which I would do like 3 posts a week. So I would go to bed like at 11 or midnight and wake up like at 4 or 5 and start working. And I probably took some years off my life in this quixotic pursuit of financial independence. And that wasn't good. And then, like I mentioned before, I got there and life was better, but my happiness pretty much stayed the same. I had put this goal on such a pedestal. I didn't really consider the good and bad things about it. So that was a pretty silly way to go about financial independence, and I would never recommend anyone do the same thing. So based on that, I get your original question, Adam.
Before we get into that, I just for those listening who might not be familiar with what a live and flip is, can you just kind of explain what it is and why it's beneficial to building wealth?
Oh, geez. So it's really good and really bad. So we would buy a house and we would live in the house and fix it up at the same time. The really good thing about this is if you're single, $250,000 in capital gains, you don't have to pay taxes on. If you're married, $500,000. So we would buy these houses, and I think we've done 8 of them so far. I'm sitting in number 8 right now. We would buy these houses, fix them up, live in them for 2 years, and then sell them and maybe pocket $200,000 in completely tax-free capital gains. Now, the big downside of this is you are living in a construction zone. So if I remember one point, Mindy had just done the laundry. She's got a laundry basket full of clean clothes, and I was doing drywall work, which is extremely messy, and there was, like, a layer of drywall dust on top of this basket of clothes, and she just started crying. I'm like, "Oh, is all this worth it?" But we kept on doing it even after that. But so it's really good financially. If you do the strategy, do it before you have children, and do it with a spouse who's going to be able to put up with a lot of chaos in life, and get your tetanus shot either. I've had a couple over the past 15 years.
Yeah, that sounds intense. I'm curious why you're still doing it.
I'm still doing it because we bought the last one in 2019, and it's still not done yet. 2 reasons for that. One was COVID happened, the kids got sent home, and I became a homeschool teacher, which was a very unpleasant experience because 'cause I'm not a good teacher, and, we had some scope creep. We ended up doing a little bit more work on the house than we originally intended. It's, like, 95% done. I'm looking around because 'cause I'm sitting in the basement now, but it's still not quite done. So this is an artifact from 2019. But Adam, if we talk in a year and I tell you I bought another one, like kick me in my painful boy bits, because that would be a big life mistake. And I swear I'm not going to do it again. It was really good financially, but not so good for my life. I need time more than money at this point in life.
Yeah, I could see that. So that brings us back to this idea of money as a goal in and of itself is not going to lead you to happiness. You mentioned before we started recording that people tend to overvalue money as a goal to the detriment and at the same time ignore other areas of life that might have a higher correlation with happiness. So let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Adam, thanks so much for bringing this up. What is the main goal of financial independence? It's not to have $10 million in a bank account or to get to some silly number. The main goal is to be happy and live your most optimal, well executed, purposeful, meaningful existence, whatever that means to you. And that's the hard part. I have no idea what's going to light you up. If happiness was easy, you'd write 3 sentences about it, everyone would follow it, and then no one would need to talk about it anymore. But you go in the bookstore and there's a million books about happiness in there. And that's because it is different for everyone. But to back up to the money thing, the main point of financial independence is to get to that happiness and to live the best life that you can imagine living. Now, what I did is I postponed my happiness and didn't work on that or anything I really wanted to or needed to work on in life to get to the money. So I defeated the whole purpose. I was just after the money without any appreciation for everything else and the whole purpose of the money. So a much better way to go about this would be to enjoy the journey, even if it takes longer. You might be at your job for longer. And if that's the case, you might want to get a job you don't hate, which is what I should have done instead of just staying there because it paid me well. Get a job you like and really make the most of the journey. There's a quote I really like. I think it's from a Stephen King book, and maybe he got this from somewhere else, but he's like, "It's wicked to wish your days away." That's exactly what I did. I'm like, "All the sacrifice is fine. I'm working 80, 90, $100 a week, but it's fine because in 5 years from now, it's gonna be so good." And how silly was that? It could have been so good right at that moment, and I didn't appreciate that or acknowledge it. My life is great now. I'm not trying to sound like Mr. Whiny Complainy Pants. I really appreciate my life now, but I love telling people this because I don't want them to do the same thing I did. And I don't think many people are crazy enough to do it, but if you are thinking about doing it, find ways to enjoy every moment. It's gonna be a little bit harder with a job, kids, and everything that comes along with being an adult, but you can do it. You can do it better than how I did it.
Yeah, I think that it's something that more people are aware of now, like not just like, especially the extreme frugality kind of streak of the fire movement. I think is people have moved on from that. Not to say that you did that, but just the idea that, you got to scrimp and save now at the expense of, enjoying your life now for this future date. But I think that people are still not building the life that they want to live until they get closer or at financial independence. So I think that there's more that people can do to start experimenting with and living that life that they think that they want now so that they get through the lessons and the learnings and the pivots before they reach financial independence. That way you say it's just like, continuing to walk down the path. It's like a 6-inch step rather than jumping off a cliff. I think that's a much more productive way to do that.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say about that is I love how diversify is now, both in the audience, the people doing this, but in all the methods that you alluded to. We hear people doing slow-fi or barista-fi, where again, they're living life a little bit of a slower pace, and it might take them longer to get to that big number, but they're acknowledging that big number isn't the end goal. They're acknowledging that there's things they want to do now, and they're okay with taking a little bit longer to get to that big number because they want to live a little bit along the way, which is so cool. I think that's, much healthier, much less binary, much less nerdy. And yeah, I pretty much was extremely frugal as well, which I don't think is the greatest thing either. If we talked a little bit about people maybe buying a $2 million house or having a house in Tahoe, if that thing is meaningful to you and genuinely provides you joy, I'm all for doing that. That's great. It's a fine line. You don't want to do things because of expectations from others. It's that external versus inner scorecard. But if it lights up your inner scorecard, man, like do it, like race cars or buy a race car and go to Streets of Willow and do that. Don't postpone that stuff. Just be careful and, try to save some money along the way too for those rainy days. You might love your job, but your job might not always love you back.
Yeah, that's a great point, right? Like that's, what I think about and talk about as financial resilience, right? Like the layoff was a huge wake up call for me on that. It's like financial independence is amazing, but financial resilience is essential. You absolutely have to have that money in the bank just in case the shit hits the fan, you lose your job. Or like I had earlier this year, I had 40,000 gallons of water in my crawl space in my basement. My air conditioner, my HVAC system was completely underwater, had to get a new one in New Year's Day, New Year's weekend. And now I'm finding out, okay, actually, I need to get another one upstairs as well. It's really piling up. But the thing is that I have prepared for this. I have saved money. I have an emergency fund. I have investments. I have things that can help me navigate this. Do I want to spend $20,000 unexpectedly? I sure do not. Absolutely not. But do I feel better knowing that I can and it's not going to devastate my life? Absolutely. Well, these
Yeah,
guys
that's
were
so good.
they were so kind. They were saying, "Hey, look, if you can't afford it, we're happy to finance it for you for 12% interest." And I was like, "What? I know this is New Jersey, but come on. The interest rate's a little sharky."
Wow. Yeah, I'll bet you're very happy to have me pay 12%.
I know, right?
Oof.
So crazy. So on this topic of not delaying living the life that you want to live, A good buddy of mine, David Moltz, who actually introduced me to financial independence and your blog and Choose FI and all the things, he had this question about the trade off between continuing to work at a high paying job that you don't necessarily love or pivoting into something that might pay a little bit less, but you are more excited about and more aligned with, but will, because it's a lower paying job, extend your path and journey to FI, take you longer to reach FI. How do you think about or counsel friends and people that you meet on making this trade off?
Wow, that's very interesting. Doug, my podcast partner, and I were just having a similar conversation, and I think it actually it depends on the numbers. There's no slam dunk answer. If the job you well, first of all, there is a one easy answer. Like if the job is causing you incredible stress or you're putting in tons of time for it, it's going to take time off your life. It's going to give you a heart attack or a stroke, and there's no reason you should stay at any job like that. But if it's not that bad, it's just not lighting you up, but it's paying you 3x what another job could do. I don't know. Maybe it's worth a compromise versus working there for a year versus 3 years at another place or 2.5 years and getting that autonomy over your time a little quicker. But I don't know. I think you have to be very careful of that. I love the old Richard Feynman quote, the physicist. He said, humans are easy to fool, and the easiest person to fool is yourself. And I definitely fooled myself and talked myself into staying at something that wasn't great. Like, I think, Adam, like the perfect situation for anyone is they like their job enough and they're in a situation so great that they would do that thing for free or they would take all their income and donate it to charity. I don't think many people have that, but if you do have it, that's an incredible thing. And on the other end of that scale is the job that's going to kill you early if you stay there for longer. But I think it's a nuanced decision, like, also, what kind of autonomy do you have at those jobs? If you've got a job where you can work from home and, like, step in to pick up a kid or that has a generous vacation policy, that's worth a lot too, or, a sabbatical policy, so I don't think there's a super easy answer to that. I'm curious, Adam, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it really is dependent on the numbers and the situation. And totally agree with you that if the job is causing you significant stress, no amount of money is worth putting your health at risk. And if you have built up a level of financial independence, you have options, right? That's why we do this in the first place, is to create options and to create, as JL calls it, FU money, right? So if you have a situation that has gotten really bad, and you have money in the bank, you can do that, right? There are, full transparency, of course, full acknowledgement that there are people who don't have that option, right? They are in a job and they depend on that money coming in, that paycheck that week, to put food on the table for their kids, right? That is not a situation that you want to be in if you can avoid it. If you are fortunate enough to have saved some money and have that financial runway where you can go 3, 6 months and find another job, getting yourself out of that very toxic situation is probably going to be a good move. Now, if you want to just switch to something that just pays less, I don't think that makes any sense. I think you need to know, like, well, let me say, if you, on the other hand, are in a job that pays extremely well, but it's okay, right? Like, I'll say my job, it pays well. It's not my life's work, but it has aspects that I can build things that I care about. Still, it still makes sense for me to keep doing that, right? I wouldn't switch from that to something that just pays less but doesn't give me anything else, right? And so I wouldn't necessarily advise this friend of mine to switch to a job that just pays less and then extends your path to FI. That doesn't seem to make sense. But now, if it's something that is what you want to be doing when you're FI, right? If you're running towards something that, let's say David loves games, right? If he had an opportunity to go work at a game design company or a game design experience company, something like that, where he would do that for free, like you said, or he wants to do that a significant amount of time in his post FI life, maybe it's worth it, right? Maybe if the job that you're in now is starting to get more intense and you're not enjoying it, but you know you'd enjoy this thing. Yeah, if it takes you a little bit longer to get to your FI number, that's fine because it doesn't really matter. You'd be doing that anyways if you were already FI. And so I think for me, that's why getting crystal clear on what you want your post FI life to look like, what you envision for yourself, as I call it, your big vision for your life, getting clear on that is the first step. And then seeing, can I do that now with this high paying job? Or can I go and move into a role that will still allow me to pay my life expenses, save for financial independence, save for traditional retirement, but actually start doing that thing that I love now? That's a different story.
Yeah, and that thing that you love to do now, there's a lot of people who quit their jobs, and I think this is maybe not rare, but unusual. They end up making more money if that's what's important to you and being more successful at whatever they're doing after their job than they ever did at their job. Like Mr. Money Mustache is a clear example of that, but there's lots of other people who have gone on and that they're doing really well and they're putting in much less time, but are doing what they want to do. Like it's powerful, Adam. If you're doing what you want to do, like for Dave, if he likes to design games or whatever, if you're doing what you really love to do in life, you're probably going to do a pretty good job at it because it's your passion. And then from that, it's not a big step that maybe someone's going to want to pay you to do that thing. And you have to tread very carefully there. You don't want to work yourself into another career if that's not what you want. But it is a pretty interesting side effect that I see a lot in the financial independence community.
And one thing that I'll say also is that what rule is there that the thing that you want to move towards has to pay less? Like, there's no reason that you can't do the thing that you want and still make the same or more money, right? It may take some time, right? Like, my personal reason for pursuing financial independence is I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I am an entrepreneur in a lot of ways, and I would love to pursue entrepreneurship full time. But I want to do it in a way that's in my own time, in my own way, and not be forcing it and really like making myself miserable just to make it work to put food on the table for my kids. I don't want that to ever factor in. I just want to be doing it because I want to be doing it. And so that's why I'm pursuing financial independence. So, but I fully expect that once I transition out of Google into this entrepreneurship, it may take some time. I'm building it now. So hopefully it will continue to, I'll be able to earn as much, if not more, than my current corporate job. And the reality is, it's like the corporate job, is capped to some degree, right? You can't double your income at a corporate job in a little bit of time, right? You'd have to move around quite a bit. It would take quite a bit of time. But with entrepreneurship, you can absolutely do that in a couple of years. It's just a matter of, do you find the right thing?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Your upside is infinite. One other thing I'll say really quick is you said something a moment ago, which was interesting. You said, I'm doing this because I want to do it. I see this all the time with blogging. Like, I think blogging has gone by the wayside a little bit, but you could always tell when people got into it for the money because they'd have these guest posts from a law firm or there'd be shilling for a product. And those people weren't successful, but you could tell the people who genuinely just wanted to be out there and write from the heart. And they probably had a natural tendency to it, but they were genuine and authentic. And when you do stuff for a reason other than money, and that money happens to be a side effect, I think you might end up making more money, even though that wasn't your original goal. Again, because you're authentic and genuine, and you're doing what you want to do, how you want to do it.
Yeah, totally agree. And, just kind of gets back to this idea that money is only one aspect of life. And people in the fire movement sometimes overvalue that as a means to creating a happy life. What are the other areas that, being on the other side of financial independence and retiring early, what are the areas that you found to be really important for you?
Oh yeah, I actually took a couple notes when we were talking earlier. Number one, the primary one is probably physical fitness. Like I was out of shape, had high blood pressure, and was probably on the road to health problems staying at my job. I weigh like 15 to 20 pounds less than I did at work. And so being able to have the time to work out, Adam, that was always the thing I would give up when I ran out of time, which was frequent because I've got two kids and a job and this blog and all that. So I'd always give up physical fitness. So just being able to make yourself physically resilient, like As a high school kid, I remember we had to do the pull-up challenge, which was torture. The class is staring at you, and I only could muster one, and I did like 12 clean pull-ups at the gym the other day, and my ass is 50. I'm old, and I don't wanna say I'm in better shape than I was back then, but I think I'm on a really good trajectory, and it's because I can go to the gym for 2 hours every day. Yesterday, I walked 37,000 steps. I can show you my Fitbit data to prove it. About 15 miles of walking. It was because I was doing manual labor,
It's an
but that brings
incredible amount of steps.
yeah, and it's not I've done 50,000 well, actually, I've done more than that in a day, but the other thing is because I've got the time, I feel like I'm more resilient because I'm physically fit, but I'm more resilient just as a person. If my furnace breaks, I can look at the LED air code, like, take the time to Google it and see if I can fix it myself. I don't always do that. Most of the time, I probably do. I don't wanna wait for a repair person to show up when it's -13 outside, which happened a couple years ago. I can fix things myself. I can figure out problems because I've got the time to do that. And I've got YouTube, which is like the best thing ever for all these projects. So I'm more physically resilient as a person and just more of life resilient, all because of the money gave me the time and autonomy to figure this stuff out.
Very cool. Are there any other areas that you've found to be really important that people on the path should be building up now?
Oh,
Physical
man.
fitness is one.
Yeah, of course, the mental health aspect, which is probably more important than anything else. If you've got issues, they're not going to go away just because you accumulated the money, but maybe you have the time to deal with them. When I met you last time at Economy, I hadn't gone to Hoffman yet, but I've been there since, and it was great. I took a week for this. I don't know, is it a CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy retreat? And it was super intense, but I feel like I'm a much better example of myself because I went to it. So, above all, if you have trauma from your childhood or whatever's going on with your mind, I think a lot of people could benefit a lot from talking to someone or doing whatever form of therapy aligns with them. And that's hard to figure out in itself, but it was so valuable for me. So, if you've got issues like this or things you need to deal with this, by all means, don't wait to work on them. Like, figure them out now because everything is going to build from that. Your relationships with other people, with your family, with your wife are going to be better when you're the best person you can be yourself. And when you're working on yourself and acknowledging that you might have things that could be improved upon, which I certainly did. And by no means am I perfect now. I still have lots of things to work on, but I feel I'm a little bit better than I was a month ago, which is all I can hope for.
So a little bit better each day, right? That's what we're going for.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge one, right? Like people think, oh, when I have more time, I'll handle these things. I'll do these things. I'll get in shape. I'll start doing some therapy. But the reality is, like, you need to do that ASAP, right? Myself included, right? Like I'm nowhere near the physical fitness that I would like to be. And it's been on my to-do list for a long time. And even having some time off now, I made some progress and I kind of hurt myself on a trampoline at a trampoline park, acting like I'm a 15-year-old. So I've been a little bit postponed, but the therapy and stuff as well. I've been investing in and on and off for years, and getting back into it. That's something that a lot of people can be taking advantage of through their work, even during work time, right? Like you don't take off, you don't go to the doctor on weekends, right? You could take an hour of your day and go and speak with somebody. And a lot of companies have these employee assistance programs where you get it completely for free. And so that has been very helpful for me. It's just nice to have a person to talk to that doesn't know you, doesn't know anyone else and you can just say whatever's on your mind. So
Yeah.
definitely recommend that.
Yeah, one really other quick thought on these things is money, physical fitness, and mental health are very similar in that they're all cumulative. One study I read about, I was in pharmacy school for a while, and there's a thing called the Farmington study, and they did autopsies on, like, I think it was people who had died of natural causes, but they realized that arterial plaque isn't something that happens when you're 50. It starts happening from the time you're born. So if you don't take care of your body when you're young, it's gonna hurt you when you're old. This is a whole lifetime thing, not just something you can pick up. And same thing with mental health. If you can get that straightened out a little bit earlier, you're going to have better relationships. It's going to be cumulative and build your whole life, and everything's going to be better from that point on, just like money. And so that's how people should think about this stuff. And that's why it shouldn't be postponed.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Another question related to the above, one fear of taking time off or pivoting is if it doesn't work out, we might not be able to get our old high paying job back, especially in the current economy where we have a ton of layoffs in tech and there are highly qualified people applying for few open positions. How does the current economy factor into the recommendation to pivot? For example, would it make sense to wait until the economy is better to pivot, like 2021, where everyone was hiring? Or if it doesn't work out, you can easily get your job back. Related to that is like, is there an optimal age to pivot?
I guess the second one is the easiest answer, the optimal time to pivot. I definitely would say that you don't have to wait till you're financially independent. If you're not crazy about your life now, you might want to pivot earlier. But like what you alluded to, Adam, having savings is going to allow you to do that. Maybe you might not have enough to live the rest of your life, but if you've got enough to support yourself for 5 or 10 years, that's enough to do some crazy experiments and do some crazy cool things with your time. Yeah, the whole tech thing and the layoffs though, if you're in a I guess I don't know how bad it is. I've been out of it for a while, so that question took me back. If you've got a name like Apple or Google on your resume, well, first of all, back up a second. I think companies like Apple, if you're in good standing, like you can take a year or two off, and I think like they guarantee that they'll hire you back. If there's probably someone in the audience who knows that who might be able to comment on that. But is it like if you're an engineer at Google, is it going to be, you might not be able to go back to Google, but is it going to be that hard to get a job that's still going to pay you above average? That might not be Google Pay or have the stock options or some of the benefits, but is it going to be that bad? I don't know. Maybe I'm out. Am I out of touch, Adam?
No, I think that like this question is coming from a very risk averse place. He's very risk averse. He just had another baby. So I think that I don't think it's going to be that hard, right? But they have designed this system at Google where it's like, and these tech companies have the equity component of your compensation goes up and up. And once you leave that, it's like, once you leave, that's gone. And so going and finding another job where you're going to have a salary or a total comp package that's the same seems a little bit unrealistic. But I think that I would say that it's probably, again, worth figuring out what you're running from and what you're running towards, right? Just bringing more awareness to the situation of like, why do I feel like I want to do this? And how urgently do I want to do this? And also, like, what other options do I have? Like, I would say, like you said, like, there are sabbatical options, right? And Google supposedly doesn't have a sabbatical program, but I have taken a sabbatical. I've taken a fully paid sabbatical. And so it's doable, right? It was basically just a lot of vacation time, but you could take it all at once and you could take an unpaid leave up to 6 months in most companies probably. And so it's like, why don't you try that before you wash your hands of the whole thing?
Yeah, and I would look at the seasons of life too. You said something that he is a young child, and that's huge. I have a friend who actually works for Amazon, and he's about to give his notice next week, actually, and he's got two young kids. He's like, you know what? I have Amazon on my resume. My kids are going to be this age once. In 4 years, they're going to be in pre 4K. They'll be gone for the whole day, and at that time, I can build myself back up. And again, I think the advice I'd give your friend is he's probably a pretty accomplished person. I think the thing that most of us lack when they say things like this is confidence and just believing that everything is going to be all right, which most of the time it is. I think most things, and I'm a natural born pessimist, believe me. So I've come a long way to be able to say this, but most things work out for the best. I always think about the worst case scenarios in life. They usually never come true. I can't think of one that's come true for me yet. I guess eventually I'll die, but hopefully not anytime soon. But yeah, have some confidence. Know that the skills that put you where you are today are going to help you build yourself back up should you need to. And yeah, giving up that stuff might be hard. You're giving up all your whatever you've earned, but your kids are all going to be wants to, and being able to spend some time with them. And I would vote. What I did at the end of my career is I went part-time, which I thought was a great compromise. I know that's not going to be available to everyone, but if you're a good worker, I think a lot of companies will put up with more stuff from you that you think they would. And for me, I had to change. I had to go from a W-2 person to a contractor, but that was something I was fine with. I still got to earn some money, but I still had now I had 4-day weekends instead of 2-day weekends, and that was great. And also a great way to test out what life would look like post financial independence, post work.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? Like that just points out that you have more options than you are currently thinking about. It starts with having awareness of like what you want, what's important to you, and then awareness that there are options, right? And so maybe it's going down to part time within your current role. Maybe it's switching to be a contractor. Maybe it's taking a job that is at a different company, but does give you the option to work a little bit less. Or maybe you just take a break, right? I'm going to have a woman, Katrina, on the podcast in a couple of weeks, and we're going to talk about taking career breaks and sabbaticals and preparing before, during, and after to just come back stronger. And, when I was chatting with her, just not on the podcast, just having a chat with her, she's telling me that people are always so afraid of coming back from this time off, thinking that like, oh no, like I have this gap in my resume. Like in America, like having a gap on your resume is like, scarlet letter. It's like, no, it's life. And like, especially if you built financial independence, like you're good either way. And so if it takes a little bit longer to find that job, that's fine. But you have skills, you have a resume that you've built up over years, especially if you're working for a big tech company or whatever, like that's a recognizable brand. You're gonna be able to get a job. And it's just a matter of having the clarity on like why you're doing it and then actually going and doing that thing that you think you want to do.
Yeah, and I would say my last piece of advice around this, Adam, would be err on the side of being a little bit dangerous and being a little bit scared. And the reason I say this is like I'm in Longmont, Mr. Money Mustache land. There's lots of early retirees here, and I know they're out there, but I've never personally met anyone who has left their job and has gone back because they're bored or they don't like their life. Almost everyone loves what life looks like afterwards. Like my life looks drastically different now than I ever thought it would 7 years ago, but it's better. Unless someone were to pay me an extreme amount of money, which no one would because I'm not worth it. And they'd have to pay me a lot and it'd be for a very short period of time. But there's no way I'm ever going back to work. It's just unless I have to, unless I'm gonna starve or eat cat food. I might eat cat food before I have to go back to work. I don't know. Like it's that good. Life is really good. And
Yeah.
I'm not making more money than I did before. I'm hardly making anything, but I've got autonomy over my time and it's so valuable. It's so nice. Like I'm looking out my window here and the sun's shining. As soon as I get off the call with you, I'm going to go for a nice walk and finish my podcast and just be aimless. I might be back in an hour and a half. I might be back in 2 hours. Man, it's glorious having autonomy over your time. It can be a little bit stressful too, because the time belongs to you. I don't want to waste it. If people's paying me, hey, I can surf the internet and look at Twitter for an hour, but I don't want to do that when the time belongs to me.
That's a good point. Yeah, I was curious. Like, tell me a little bit about what does life look like for you now that you're 7 years in, and how has that shifted over time? Like maybe when you walk me through like when you first left work, like what did it look like, and how has that changed over the last 7 years?
Yeah. So when I first left, we were still working on a house remodel. We were winding that down, so that consumed my time. And now I'm still working on a different one. So that consumes a little bit of my time. But now I'm in a much better state. So now when I wake up, we spend time with the kids. I'd be present with them. I'm not on the computer. I stand out there waiting for we ride share with neighbors. So I stand out there with my child, wait for them to come pick her up. I give her a hug. She goes off to school. Often, if she has a school activity, I'll volunteer for it, or I have lunch with her about twice a month. I'll just pick her up from school. We'll pick a place and have lunch. But my basic routine is to work out for probably the first 2 hours of every morning. I don't eat. I'll go to the gym or take a walk down to a co-working space that I own and do squats there. So that's the first 2 hours. That takes me till about 10. From like 10 to 1, I'll be doing some kind of work like on the podcast that I have or working on the house or doing some other task. Today, we went to the branch place to drop off a bunch of branches. Man, my file life doesn't sound too glamorous. We were at the trash recycling place. Usually it's not like that. And then we pick the kids up at 2:30 and spend time with them. Like I have a rollerblading date with my younger kid this afternoon, and we're going to do some math homework. She's got a concert tomorrow. I actually, a funny story out of, I didn't get banned, but as soon as I left work, I'm like, I'm going to volunteer for every single thing at my kid's school. The school sent me an email. They're like, we appreciate this, but there's other parents who want to volunteer to it. We only need so many people, so we're not going to have you at everything. And I'm like, okay, that's fair, but how fortunate and how lucky am I that I was able to do that and spend that time with my kid. I don't know if she appreciated it as much as I did. Maybe she will someday, but I sure as hell appreciated it.
Yeah, and you can't get that time back, right? Like that's she's only gonna be that age once.
Yeah, it's a narrow window, small amount of time. She's
Yeah,
14 now, and she still likes me. She's not at the I don't like my parents stage yet, but that could happen
that's
any day.
great. You have one or two?
Two, the older one is 17, and she's pretty good too. Yeah, she's in high school. And man, one more year with her, and that's it. You got to think. I love the Wait But Why blog.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Urban, he had one about your time, but he said for most people, after your kids are 18 and they move out, you've spent 95% of the time you'll ever spend with them. And I think that's more true now than ever because people move. A lot of families fly apart just for jobs, not for any bad reason. But like my kids, oh, I'm sick of Colorado. I want to go live in California or like Chicago. I'm like, oh, it makes me a little sad. I wish you wanted to be close to us, but I support your dreams, whatever you want to do after school. I think that 95% is super important to keep in the back of your mind. I think it might inform and tweak some of your decisions, especially when they're young. And let me tell you, those that 95% 0 to 18, all the quality in there isn't the same. I think when they're younger is probably a little bit higher quality than when they become older and have a little bit more angst and sometimes lock themselves in their room for an hour or two and claim the world is against them and start wearing black clothes.
I can imagine that's challenging. Also, 4 and 5 is challenging as well. I mean that the thick of that, but the stakes are lower. The stakes are much lower. All right, Carl, let's switch gears now into what I call the mindful fire final four. You ready?
I am. Go for it.
All right. So the first question is about envisioning. And we talked a lot today about getting clear on what you want and starting to experiment with and live your post-fi life now. I'm curious. It sounds like you didn't do too much of that when you were on the journey to fi. You really prioritized getting there as quickly as possible. What would you do differently if you had another chance to do it? And similarly, what would you recommend to people who are on the path to fi so that they can avoid waiting until they get to the end and then figuring it out then?
Yeah, I would have left my stressful job. I would have had a job that I enjoyed, and I would have tried to do it maybe even part-time, even just having Fridays off, maybe doing 4 10s maybe would have given me more time to work on myself, more mental and just time bandwidth. So that's something I completely would have done different if I could do it over again. There's no reason to postpone life.
Very good. The second question is, what piece of advice would you give to someone early on their path to financial independence?
Ooh, early on their path to financial independence. I would say there's people who say this is a sacrifice. I didn't think it was because I was a frugal person and not a big spender. And like you, Adam, the autonomy and financial security was super important to me. But let's say you aren't like me and you think that's true. You see your friends buying X car and you want that car too, but you think this whole financial thing is going to compromise that. If you think that way, make financial independence like a 3 or 4 year part of your life. Make it a compromise for that amount of time, max out your 401k, whatever you can do to save while you're super young. Maybe do what I did, a live and flip, which is a great way, and just get that ball rolling. And then after that time, after you've got a good starter there, the money's going to take care of itself eventually. It's going to do its own thing. Then you can have the thing, but just sacrifice for a little bit just to get that ball rolling, get that safety net there. It's going to be a safety net initially because it's not going to be that huge, but give it 20 or 30 years of compound interest. It's going to blow up and be enough for you to retire on. So yeah, save hard, but you don't have to do it forever or for 2 decades like I did.
Very good. Now, the third question is, what piece of advice would you give to someone getting started with meditation and or mindfulness?
Ooh, that's a good one, and I am by no means an expert on this, but we live in a very distracted society. I just spent a week without my phone, which was prior to that. From the time I got my first iPhone, which was a 3GS a long, long time ago. God, that was probably around 2010. I never gone without 24 hours without my phone, and, most people don't have the joy of having a undistracted mind, but just taking a quiet walk around the neighborhood without a phone, maybe just with a pad of paper and a pen to take notes on, you'll be amazed. And there's actual studies about this. Google Stanford Walking study, and you'll find it about what your brain starts doing when you don't fill it with stimulus all the time. Put your phone down, turn off the TV, and just see what happens. It's amazing. Like I get incredibly creative. Like my brain just starts throwing all these ideas at me and maybe go for a walk with someone and start bouncing stuff off with them. It is incredible. But I think just from this retreat, there was a period of time where we couldn't talk for 24 hours, and it was pretty glorious as well. Just being alone with your thoughts. It can be a little bit scary sometimes, but you're going to learn something about yourself. And I think you're going to be a little bit more resilient of a person if you can go to a stoplight and not have to look at your phone or stand in line at the grocery store and not have to check your texts or anything like that. It's okay. Doc G, Jordan Grumet, I met him at a financial independence retreat called Camp Fi. And I'm like, Jordan, like, what do you want out of life? What do you want to do? He's like, I just want to be. Like, wow, I didn't see that coming. I thought you'd like say, I want to write a book or a screenplay. And he just said, I just want to be. It can be good to just be, not do anything. Just sit there and I don't know. I like watching the clouds go by on a plane. Yeah, just sit there and observe the waves or watch the trees. It's good. I think everyone should try to do that for at least 10 minutes of every part of their day.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill, right? Resting is a skill, being is a skill. We're so used to doing. And I'm finding myself like, I need to leave my phone behind. If it's with me, I'm going to look at it. They're designed to addict us. That's the reality of the situation. And so if you know that, you can just leave it behind and have a different experience. So
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to do more and more, but it's very much a work in progress.
nice.
All right, Carl. The last question is, how can people connect with you online, follow all of the things that you're up to in the world? We didn't talk too much about your podcast, but I know you have two podcasts and a blog. So where can people connect with you and learn what you're up to?
Yeah, I'm doing lots of fun things to amuse myself that don't make any money, but they're fun. The first podcast is Mile High Fi. That's just fi.com, Mile High Fi. The second one is I have a podcast with my wife, Mindy. So that one is mindyonmoney.com. It's a good name with good alliteration. And I still blog at 1500days.com. After 11 years of doing it, I still enjoy it. So I did not shut it down.
Very good. Thank you so much, Carl, for being here and sharing your wisdom and experience with the audience. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Adam. I can't wait to talk to you more on one of my podcasts and to talk more about all this in person because I'm super intrigued by how I can shape my mind to be a little bit better adjusted than it is right now.
It's a lifelong process. We're all trying to figure it out, right?
Yeah, it's the journey though. That's where all the fun happens.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
See you, Adam.